Blood slicked down Judge Eleanor Marlowe's temple as Officer Rourke jammed a pistol to her head. "Not so untouchable now, are you?" he muttered, unaware of who she really was. Sirens rose somewhere distant. That ignorance might be her single edge, if she moved carefully. Before we plunge into this shocking tale, drop your city in the comments. Tap like and subscribe to join our community of truth seekers. If you watch this unfold right in front of you, how would you respond? Let's uncover how this nightmare began and how Judge Marlowe fought back. Judge Eleanor Marlowe had earned a reputation across the Eastern District of Michigan over 23 years on the federal bench. At 56, she commanded any room with unflinching fairness and incisive legal reasoning that even detractors respected, however grudgingly. No one mistook her for soft, sentimental, or easily intimidated, least of all attorneys. But today wasn't for gavels or robes. Eleanor had traded chambers for jeans and a simple sweater, steering her modest Toyota instead of her Mercedes toward rural Michigan to see her sister Portia. Long autumn light cut across the two-lane blacktop entering Westbrook, a town she'd passed many times without stopping. She hummed along to a jazz standard, thoughts drifting to a quiet weekend when red-blue strobes pulsed in her rearview mirror. Reflexively, Eleanor checked her speed, steady within the limit. She signaled, eased onto the shoulder, lowered the window, and placed both hands atop the wheel, like her father taught. Two officers approached, flanking the car, palms resting on holstered guns. The posture felt absurdly heightened for a minor stop, but Eleanor kept composed. The one at her window, nameplate ROURKE, stooped with no trace of courtesy. His gaze skimmed her face. Something in it hardened, an expression she knew by heart. He spoke slowly, theatrically, as if English might be new to her. "License and registration." Now the clipped command stripped away even the pretense of respect. Eleanor answered evenly, "Good afternoon, officer. May I ask why I was pulled over?" The second cop at passenger side, Baird, scoffed audibly, enjoying the performance. Rourke's face set. 40 in a 35. License and registration, or we're going to have a problem." Eleanor was certain she'd been dead on the limit, but she recognized the scene before it fully formed. She'd heard it in testimony for years, watched it metastasize in transcripts like rot under fresh paint. "I don't believe I was speeding," she said, "but I'm happy to provide my information. I'd also like your badge numbers." A simple, lawful request detonated their composure. Rourke leaned in, contempt barely leashed. "Listen here, sweetheart. You people always bring trouble driving through where you don't belong." "You people" hung in the air, familiar, poisonous. Eleanor had seen those words printed in depositions, recited in her courtroom, coded into complaints that smelled of smoke. She stayed steady. "I'll hand over my license and registration, Officer Rourke. I'd still like your badge and your partner's, please." Baird circled to Rourke's side, smirking. "We got ourselves a lawyer, Rourke." Heads up, Rourke barked a laugh without humor. "Nah, she probably binges cop shows, right, honey?" Eleanor reached slowly toward her purse on the passenger seat. Baird shouted, "She's reaching! Weapon!" And the world shattered. Steel rasped. Both drew down, yanked open the door, and dragged her out hard. Her shoulder jolted as they slammed her against her car. Cold cuffs cinched bone tight. "Resisting arrest and threatening an officer," Baird announced, rooting through her purse. He found the wallet, whistled. "Nice ride for someone like you." Indignation flared, then narrowed to a lens. Eleanor switched to record mode, the mental kind honed by years of examination and cross. Every slur, every deviation from procedure, every gratuitous twist of the cuffs, logged. She decided not to reveal who she was. She needed to see them unmasked. A sedan slowed. A teenager in the passenger seat raised a phone, filming. Baird saw and abandoned the search, storming toward the car and barking for them to move. The vehicle sped off. Eleanor memorized the plate. Evidence. Rourke shoved her toward the cruiser, muttering low, racially loaded cruelties. Designer purse, nice car. Always amazes me what you folks manage to afford. Must be some gig. The implication slicked the air like oil. Eleanor said nothing, cataloging while the cuffs chewed grooves into her wrists. This wasn't arrest for a crime, it was punishment for existing where they decided she shouldn't. As they wedged her into the back seat, she glanced at her Toyota, ironic choice for modesty. In the Mercedes, the stolen vehicle assumption might have screamed even louder. The cruiser rolled toward Westbrook police, carrying Eleanor toward a station that would reveal a rot deeper than she'd imagined. The station might have been frozen in the late 70s, sickly fluorescence, cracked linoleum, stained ceiling tiles. Eleanor tracked details with judicial precision. A Confederate flag mug on a desk, a framed "Whites Only" sign, displayed like quaint decor, not shame. Processing staff barely looked up. Contempt routine, not reactive. They pulled the cuffs only after locking her into a holding cell that already held two black detainees. The steel door clanged shut with a finality she'd heard described at sentencing, but never felt on her own skin. She rubbed her wrists, examined the red grooves, then turned to the others calmly. The younger woman, early 30s, hugged herself on a bench, eyes wary. The young man paced, all nervous energy and shallow breaths. "I'm Eleanor," she said, omitting title. "Talia," the woman answered after a beat. "This is Malik. They hauled him in right before you." The story spilled, halting and bitter. Talia had been shopping at a boutique. Even with a receipt for a small perfume, the owner accused her of theft. Rourke cuffed her on sight without checking. Malik, 21, had finished his shift at the grocery store, waiting for his ride. Baird labeled it loitering, cuffed him for suspicion. Eleanor listened like a judge and a neighbor, asking pointed, humane questions without revealing her bench. The parallels stacked quickly. Same officers, same disregard, same presumption of guilt. A pattern emerged, one she knew from civil rights dockets. A casual machine of humiliation designed to grind people down. Heavy footsteps approached. A broad man with a sheriff's star and harrow, stitched above the pocket, stopped at the bars, Rourke and Baird flanking him. Late 60s, salt and pepper, and the kind of swagger that announces authority. "Busy day," he drawled, eyes landing on Eleanor. "Giving my officers trouble?" "I'd like my phone call, Chief Harrow," Eleanor replied. His brows twitched at her reading his nameplate. "Phone calls are a privilege, not a right," he lied. "Our computers are acting up. Processing may take a while." He didn't blink, asking Rourke, "What are the charges?" "Speeding, resisting, disrespect," Rourke said. Harrow nodded, as if those inventions were unimpeachable. "Looks like you're our guest overnight. Judge Stanton doesn't hold court until tomorrow afternoon." Eleanor filed away the name. Another puzzle piece. "I have the right to call," she repeated, calm. "And those charges are fabricated." Polite tone, adamant backbone, color crept up the chief's neck. "We'll get to your call when we get to it." Paperwork first, he left. Rourke and Baird smirked in his wake. Eleanor sat again, absorbing what she'd witnessed. Procedure treated as optional, rights as decorations. She returned to Talia and Malik, quietly gathering facts. Over hours, more rot revealed itself. Photos showed Harrow mugging beside suited men, officials, and businessmen. In one, he stood beaming beside a robed judge, likely Stanton. During shift change, Baird bragged about meeting quotas, targeting Oak Lane because those people need reminders. "Stanton always backs us," he said. Talia leaned close, whispering through clenched teeth. "It's constant. My cousin got stopped 3 times last week. No tickets, just harassment. They're trying to shove us out." As Eleanor probed, a larger story surfaced. The historically Black Oak Lane neighborhood, bled by relentless stops, code tickets, and intimidation. Meanwhile, the developer named Vaughn Kincaid was buying properties at insultingly low prices. "They offered my grandmother half her home's worth," Malik said. "When she refused, fines started stacking for yard violations she never got before." The pattern snapped into focus, policing as leverage in a property squeeze. Hours later, a new officer approached, younger, posture professional without toxicity. Nameplate Danner? He unlocked the cell. Miss Marlowe, I need to process your information at occupation. He stopped, eyes flicking between screen and ID, his face drained. You're Judge Eleanor Marlowe, Eastern District. She nodded once. Excuse me, Your Honor. He vanished into Harrow's office. Within minutes, the station's temperature flipped from smug to frantic. Judge Marlowe, Chief Harrow boomed on return, performance voice on high. Unfortunate misunderstanding. We had no idea who you were. The sudden hospitality couldn't hide the quiver underneath. Eleanor watched it like bad testimony. Rourke and Baird hovered behind, shock shredding their earlier swagger. Baird had gone pale. Rourke's jaw ticked like a faulty metronome. If you'd just identified yourself, Rourke ventured, grasping, we could have avoided all this. The message was grotesque, rights for the credentialed. Eleanor's answer carried courtroom steel. What happened here should not happen to any citizen, regardless of position. She kept engagement minimal, cataloging every sideways glance, every too-quick correction. Around her, officers straightened flags, swept memorabilia off desks, conjured paperwork they'd claimed was delayed an hour earlier. Phones rang constantly. Harrow whispered reassurances to some unseen audience. The most telling arrival, a silver-haired man in a suit worth a mortgage, commanding instant deference, even from Harrow. Judge Marlowe, Samuel Stanton, county judge. Heavy signet ring, polished nails. Deeply sorry for any misunderstanding, he purred. Perhaps we can discuss matters privately, judge to judge, Stanton suggested, smile never touching his calculating eyes. Eleanor requested her belongings instead. Baird fetched her purse from evidence, trying to reorder its contents to blur his rummaging. She noted the clumsy edits. Danner processed release with trembling hands. Through the glass doors, 2 officers hauled in an elderly black man, cuffed and jostled. Their loud commentary about a supposed code violation, stripping dignity in public. Seeing Stanton beside Eleanor, they hesitated. Stanton gestured them to a side entrance, reflexively preserving appearances. The routine cruelty was unmistakable. Eleanor asked to use the station phone, claiming a dead cell battery. She called her clerk, Devon, speaking in code that sounded like docket housekeeping. Delay my review on Hampton discrimination briefs. Start preliminary research into recent rural cases. Traffic stops and property disputes in historically black neighborhoods. Devon understood. As she prepared to leave, Harrow offered a car an obsequious smile. I'll personally drive you anywhere. Unnecessary, she replied. I'll drive myself. Relief washed his face. Premature relief. Stanton sidled close, lowering his voice. Let's keep this between us. Small departments lack federal polish, but mean well. A formal complaint burdens strained local resources, Stanton finished, eyes telegraphing calculation. Eleanor met his gaze. I'll give this incident the attention it deserves. His shoulder sag betrayed misreading. He mistook diplomacy for surrender. Outside, she breathed clean air and braced for what would come next. Have you ever seen someone in power overplay their hand, only to realize they picked the wrong target? Type 1 in the comments. If Judge Marlowe should seek justice not only for herself, but for everyone ground under this scheme. What would you do? Like and subscribe for more true grit stories. Portia Marlowe's modest 2-story on Westbrook's outskirts felt like sanctuary. The sisters were different. Eleanor chose law's structure. Portia built movements in church basements, but they were ferociously loyal. Seeing Eleanor's rumpled sweater and haunted calm, Portia ushered her inside. Elle, what happened? The account poured methodically. Portia listened, anger simmering beneath unsurprised nods. Then she vanished to her office and returned with a thick binder labeled Westbrook, documentation, and an aging laptop. You're not the first. Not close. Over 2 hours, Eleanor's understanding shifted from isolated outrage to a cog in something orchestrated. For 3 years, Portia had documented discrimination in Westbrook, especially in Oak Lane. Interviews notarized, photos of questionable stops, spreadsheets showing disproportionate arrests, copies of code citations, and records of property seizures. The binder was part archive, part indictment. On screen, a map glowed with red pins like hot coals. Oak Lane's been home to black families since the 1920s, Portia said. Folks who moved north and finally owned something. She clicked to a property transfer timeline. See this? Kincaid's company buys low across the grid. The pattern creates pressure from inside. Eleanor didn't need it explained twice. Force the holdouts? Eleanor murmured. Portia nodded. And guess who brings the squeeze? She flipped to police incidents, page after page, where Oak Lane residents were stopped, ticketed, searched. Rourke and Baird appeared like watermarks. Harassment swells until living here feels impossible, then liens, then auctions, then bulldozers. And Stanton? Eleanor asked, Portia's mouth set. Rubber stamps everything. Evictions, liens, dismissals of complaints, referrals against any attorney who pushes. He's the judicial fuse box keeping the lights on. Eleanor explained her coded call to Devon. We'll need proof of coordination. Police to court to developer, she said. Portia hesitated, then exhaled. One more piece. A lawyer tried to fight Kincaid. Judge Stanton reported him for ethics violations. He folded to save his license. The depth of the threat clarified. Eleanor's outrage cooled to strategy. They would need airtight facts and safekeeping. Fast, quiet, relentless. While Portia cooked, Eleanor used federal credentials to scan records the public couldn't access. The picture worsened. Every complaint against Westbrook PD in a decade, dismissed by Stanton's court. Code enforcement in Oak Lane up 400%. Citations in white neighborhoods down. Financials showed Kincaid funding Stanton and Harrow's foundation. Across town, a late-night meeting convened in Stanton's paneled study. Harrow, Rourke, Baird, and Vaughn Kincaid himself. A federal judge, Kincaid fumed. Do you grasp the heat this brings? We're 6 months from breaking ground on Oak Lane Square. Stanton tried soothing, but anxiety crawled under his polished words. She left without filing a complaint, Stanton insisted. My read, she wants to put it behind her. Harrow grimaced. She called from the station, asked about discrimination research. Lawyer talk Rourke, jittery now, pushed hard. We need to get ahead. Discredit her before she claims anything. Baird nodded, eager. Say she was intoxicated, Baird suggested. Erratic. Stanton considered, slow nod forming. Connections in the state judiciary can raise quiet concerns about her stability. Kincaid, ever transactional, added, media can frame this as judicial overreach, personal vendetta. Samuel, go on record. You reached out. She refused. They didn't know Eleanor had planned for it. Before leaving the station, she'd gotten a full medical exam at Westbrook Community Hospital, documenting sobriety and the wrist abrasions from the cuffs. Through a license plate she'd memorized, Portia found the teenager witness. They secured video, showing the rough arrest. At Portia's table, they outlined a strategy, addressing Eleanor's mistreatment and an entire community's. They'd leverage federal channels and trusted allies, protect evidence from seizure, invite oversight without spooking locals. Eleanor braced for a fight against not just bad actors, but a system fortified by money and fear. The counterpunch landed by morning. The Westbrook Gazette screamed, federal judge detained after erratic driving. Officials concerned. Anonymous sources alleged she tried to use her office to dodge consequences. Harrow expressed regret for a federal jurist's unprofessional behavior. Stanton preached that no one was above the law. Eleanor read, face impassive, anger braided tight. Portia slammed the paper down. Classic playbook. Character assassination, then isolation. You're next, then me. Portia was right. By mid-morning, Building code violations materialized at Porsche's community center despite a clean inspection 3 months earlier, threatening closure within 48 hours. Meanwhile, colleagues called Eleanor from federal chambers, support laced with caution, a few urging quiet resolution to avoid institutional embarrassment. The squeeze widened. Talia phoned, sobbing. Officers had visited her job. Her manager fired her for unreliability, despite spotless reviews. Malik was rearrested for marijuana sales, bail unreachable. Eleanor's complaints to state authorities met syrupy bureaucracy, requests for more documentation, slow walks that smelled like political interference. Stanton's network was working. That afternoon, Eleanor and Portia met civil rights attorney Damon Reynolds 30 miles away, close enough to care, far enough to breathe and strategize without eavesdroppers. Reynolds looked worn, stubborn, alive with purpose. 7 years trying to crack Westbrook, he said, gesturing to a wall of labeled files. 23 clear violations. Each case collapsed. Witness intimidation, evidence tampering, judicial dismissal. He fanned photos, affidavits, transcripts, stories that rhymed with Eleanor's experience line for line. 3 years ago, he said, a black business owner lost property after fabricated health violations. Witnesses recanted. Stanton tossed the case for a lack of evidence. Another folder showed 5 traffic stops just like Eleanor's, resisting, disrespect as boilerplate. Every complaint died in Stanton's courtroom, attorneys disciplined for daring. None of my clients was a federal judge who lived it, Reynolds said, meeting her eyes. That changes the calculus. Eleanor moved carefully. Federal evidence storage for Portia's archive, quiet outreach to DOJ civil rights through a trusted former clerk, groundwork for a confidential meeting with the state attorney general's team. Evidence went to secure federal vaults. The DOJ contact took preliminary notes without opening alarms. A private meeting with the Attorney General's office was set in Detroit. No local intermediaries, no courtesies. Eleanor kept public silence, which rattled Harrow and Stanton more than speeches. Quiet is a hunter's language. In a federal building conference room, Eleanor presented systematically. Deputy A.G. Lawrence Chen admitted they'd seen smoke, 3 prior complaints, but witnesses had retracted. Senior investigator Monica Patterson said it plainly. We suspect entrenched corruption, but Stanton's political insulation is thick. Translation: build a case that survives pressure. That evening, an anonymous text. Not all of us support this. Need to talk. Courthouse lot. Midnight. Trapper Lifeline. With precautions. New location, Reynolds nearby. Eleanor met the sender, Officer Danner. Nervous, resolute, 8 months on the force, ideals scuffed but not destroyed. He began to talk. There's a pipeline, Harrow to Stanton to Kincaid, Danner said, voice barely above wind. They call it community improvement. It's targeted harassment in Oak Lane until people sell cheap. He could provide lost dashcam clips, internal emails targeting Oak Lane, and pay records showing bonuses tied to arrests and seizures. His motive was personal and principled. His grandmother had lost her home to a similar scheme elsewhere. I need protection, he said. They'll end me if they suspect. Eleanor promised federal witness options if the evidence held. It could be the key that finally cracked Westbrook's sealed system open. Driving back, the responsibility pressed heavier than her robe. What started as a traffic stop now touched hundreds of lives. Officers, judges, developers, families. Opportunity and danger rose together. Portia met her at the door with grim news. Emergency safety inspection at the center. Tomorrow morning, she said, and Kincaid filed for expedited demolition permits for 3 Oak Lane properties acquired through tax liens. Acceleration meant panic on their side. The conspirators were sprinting to concrete before oversight could arrive. Eleanor and Portia worked deep into night, refining plans under the hum of the kitchen's old light. They mapped tasks, secured Danner's materials, shore up Talia and Malik, keep the teen witness safe, pressure the AG's office for interim steps, and prepare filings that would survive hostile forums. Their opponents had money, muscle, and microphones. Eleanor had law, facts, and stubborn courage. Sometimes that's enough. Dawn brought a parked dark sedan across from Portia's house, driver staring without pretense. During Eleanor's visit to Oak Lane to gather stories, the same car shadowed them, a metronome of intimidation. That evening, glass shattered. Brick through Portia's window. Note wrapped around it. Mind your own business. Police dawdled 2 hours. The responding officers shrugged it off as kids, performed a cursory look, and left. Calls began. Blocked numbers, distorted voices. Drop it or get hurt. Eleanor logged everything. When she visited the county courthouse to review property files, she met Stanton in an empty corridor, smile lacquered, eyes cold. "I respect the federal bench," he began, voice heavy with collegial varnish. "Different spheres, different concerns." He stepped closer, softening. "Colleagues, respect boundaries. When lines blur, complications follow." Eleanor offered neither assent nor argument. He pivoted to bait. "Property context can be opaque. Dinner? Professional courtesy." She thanked him without committing. His parting shot stripped subtlety. "I'd hate to see a distinguished career dinged by small-town misunderstandings. The judicial community is smaller than it seems." The threat hung like humidity. Eleanor left with certainty. The rot touched every layer, dressed in robes and smiles. That night, Eleanor's federal office was burglarized, missing specific civil rights and housing files. The official label, random break-in, ignored how targeted it was. Near midnight, Rourke parked under Portia's windows, spotlights flaring and siren pips at intervals, harassment wrapped as patrol. No pretense of subtlety anymore. Threats were followed by theater. At Westbrook's lone upscale restaurant, Kincaid manufactured a chance encounter as Eleanor dined with Portia and Reynolds. He approached like a donor at a gala, smile purchased, hand extended. "Judge Marlowe, what a pleasure. Vaughn Kincaid. I hear you're interested in our town's future." He didn't wait for permission to linger. "I'd love to share my vision for Westbrook. Oak Lane has potential." The practiced cadence said he'd sold this pitch 100 times to people who never lived there. Portia's jaw set. Reynolds watched Kincaid like a problem with a predictable answer, if timed correctly. Eleanor shook his hand briefly, not rising. "I'm always interested in civic planning," she said, tone dry as paper. Kincaid's eyes flicked toward Reynolds, then Portia, noting allies. "I prefer to deal judge to judge," he added, telegraphing disdain for everyone else. Eleanor let the insult land without acknowledgement. After he left, Reynolds exhaled. "He's worried," he said. "Worried men talk too much. Keep nudging." Eleanor nodded, already thinking about Danner's files. Timing would be everything. When to show her cards, when to force the state's hand, and when to flood survivors with sharper, safer help. Back home, Danner's first package arrived through a secure conduit, dashcam footage lost by IT, internal briefings singling out Oak Lane hotspots, and a spreadsheet of bonuses keyed to arrests, seizures, and liens in the district. The pattern was unmistakable: performance pay for dispossession, masquerading as proactive policing. Eleanor forwarded copies to federal storage, and Reynolds, keeping originals in separate secure envelopes. She called Talia, lined up an employment attorney and hardship fund. Malik's mother got a bond hearing motion and a volunteer investigator. The teen videographer received a pro bono media lawyer, an off-site backup for the file. Pressure tightened. The Gazette published an editorial about dangerous federal meddling, parroting talking points. Social media accounts with bot-like rhythms smeared Eleanor's integrity. Then came whispers that a judicial conduct complaint might be filed against her. Stanton's polish masked a machine humming behind him. Eleanor revised the plan. They'd file in multiple venues: federal civil rights suit, state ethics referrals, and a motion to disqualify Stanton in any Oak Lane matters due to campaign donations from Kincaid. Parallel tracks multiply friction, systems that depend on quiet hate noise. She sharpened drafts deep into night. Danner texted again, "More tomorrow." He risked everything for truth and a memory of his grandmother's porch. Eleanor promised protection, then pinged Chin and Patterson with a heads up about incoming corroboration. If the state lagged, federal eyes would already be open. Two doors are harder to quietly close than one. At dawn, Portia's inspection unfolded like theater designed for failure. Inspectors with clipboards flagged egress hazards that hadn't existed at last inspection, electrical concerns contradicted by licensed reports, occupancy miscounts where there were sign-in sheets. Portia filmed, asked for code sections, and pushed everything into the record. Eleanor documented each exchange, making a contemporaneous log. "We'll appeal administratively and in court," she said. "They're trying to close your mouth before we open ours." Portia smiled thinly. "They forget we were raised by Sunday school women with long memories." The inspector's pen noticeably shook at that line. Malek's emergency hearing landed that afternoon. Reynolds argued fabrication, pointing to schedule records and the implausible bail. Stanton wasn't on the bench. A visiting judge reduced bond, then recused at a phone call. Even small victories cost sweat. Malek's mother whispered thanks through tears to Eleanor in the hallway. That night, the dark sedan returned. A camera flash popped from inside, photographs taken of whoever entered or left Portia's home. Eleanor called it in. Dispatch logged it. Patrol never came. She filed a supplemental report with Chen and Patterson. Paper trails aren't glamorous, but they corral wandering truths. Reynolds flagged a former city engineer willing to talk. Code sweeps, coincidentally, aligned with Kincaid acquisition schedules. Emails showed priority corridors matching parcels under negotiation. A polite euphemism, blight remediation, masked targeted displacement. The engineer wanted indemnity and a route out of town. Eleanor had ideas. Meanwhile, the hospital released Eleanor's exam results to her counsel, clean for alcohol or drugs, medical photos of wrist bruising, notes about shoulder strain. Documentation is oxygen. Baird's incident report changed twice in 2 days, details shifting like footprints in surf. Reynolds smiled grimly. "They'll drown in their edits." Eleanor stayed publicly silent. The quiet unnerved them. It hinted at strategies they couldn't anticipate. Harrow staged a community forum about public safety, with pre-screened questions and planted applause. Portia organized a counter-gathering across town, neighbors testifying, cameras rolling, church coffee fueling righteous patience. On camera, an elder described 3 fines in a week for offense unchanged in 20 years. A nurse spoke about being pulled over twice on the same commute. A teacher described a student's fear of walking home past the station. The stories echoed, harmonized, and braided into a rope Eleanor could throw to investigators. Chen called with guarded encouragement. "Keep gathering. The pattern is clearer." Patterson added, "We'll need a clean chain of custody on Danner's pulls." Eleanor had that already. Hashes recorded, time-stamped affidavits, parallel storage. Portia joked that Eleanor could color-code a tornado. The laugh landed like medicine. Retaliation escalated. A slashed tire, dead raccoon left on Portia's porch, a voicemail consisting of heavy breathing and the soft click of a gun being racked. Reynolds insisted they rotate safe houses. Eleanor refused to disappear. "I won't make it easy for them to pretend we imagined this," she said. They compromised. Eleanor stayed with a friend for 2 nights while Portia slept at the church. Danner's second package arrived, a memo titled Oak Lane Optimization, with bullet points about stop ratios, citation targets, and behavioral compliance. The spreadsheet columns labeled arrests/liens/bonus glowed like a confession. Eleanor looped in a forensic accountant to trace foundation donations and construction contracts, money leaves fingerprints, early trails connected Kincaid subsidiaries to shell vendors servicing city departments. If they could link those payments to code sweeps and court calendars, the picture would become impossible to wave away as coincidence. That evening, Eleanor returned to the courthouse records room. The clerk on duty whispered, "Be careful," and slid her a stack faster than protocol. Inside were notices of expedited hearings on properties recently liened in Oak Lane, scheduled curiously close to Kincaid's major capital calls. The calendar told truths nobody announced. She photographed everything, logged times, and signed the checkout card with a steady hand. On her way out, Rourke appeared in the hallway, as if conjured by grievance. He smiled without warmth. "Enjoying our little town?" he asked. "I'd hate for you to get the wrong impression." The menace wore a badge. "I prefer accurate impressions," Eleanor said, walking past. His whisper followed. "Careful what you wish for." Outside, air tasted like rain. She drove the long way back, taking random turns to shake the tail that might not exist, except that she knew it did. Some checks aren't paranoia, they're hygiene. Reynolds filed a preservation letter to the city and police department, warning that spoliation would trigger sanctions. The Gazette mocked it as grandstanding. Online, real residents countered with phone footage and timestamps. In the comment churn, something shifted. Skeptical readers began asking boring, deadly questions about calendars and codes. The Attorney General's office scheduled witness interviews. Patterson wanted Talia first, then Malik's mother, then the engineer. Danner would come last, with security baked in. Portia coordinated rides, childcare, and pep talks. Movement work looks like casseroles and calendar invites, not slogans, and that's why it wins. Stanton visited the center's inspection appeal, wearing benevolence like a suit. "We all want safe spaces," he said, regret curdled into policy. Portia read code sections back to him line by line, owning the room like a choir director. Cameras captured his blink rate quickening. Performance sours under bright lights. Behind the smile, Stanton made calls. The Gazette's next piece tut-tutted activist theatrics, then misquoted Portia. It didn't land. The video clips were indisputable. Eleanor kept her filings quiet, nearly ready, complaints that braided federal claims with state ethics, designed so even reluctant readers couldn't look away. Danner's third delivery included audio from a supervisor's meeting. "Make Oak Lane uncomfortable." Someone joked about reminding them where they belong. Laughter followed. The tape's banality was its horror. No grand conspiracy language, just day planner cruelty. Reynolds played it twice, then said, "This is the spine." Eleanor scheduled a sit-down with a respected local pastor who'd counseled families losing homes. He provided sworn statements, funeral programs with addresses, and phone trees documenting last-minute eviction calls. Grief has record-keeping habits. "They underestimated our memory," he said, patting the folder. "We write things down." That night, the dark sedan idled again. Eleanor stepped onto the porch, camera raised, and filmed until it pulled away. 2 minutes later, Portia's phone pinged, a live stream alert from a neighbor's doorbell camera. The driver's face was clear, bared. The file went to Patterson with clock face accuracy. Patterson texted, "We see it." Chen added, "Stay predictable in movements until we greenlight transition to formal action." Eleanor replied, "Understood." She updated Devon, who had already compiled a matrix of dates, names, and exhibits that could anchor a judge's attention to specifics. Facts are stubborn and contagious. Eleanor visited Oak Lane barbershops and kitchens, listening rather than speaking. A grandmother produced a stack of citations tied with baker's twine. A college student had a spreadsheet of stops by block. A contractor described permit purgatory. Eleanor left with documents and hugs that felt like sworn oaths. Back at the house, she spread materials across the table, building a timeline so dense it looked like woven cloth. Portia labeled clips and scanned affidavits. Reynolds wrote captions ordinary people could read, and judges couldn't ignore. The work wasn't glamorous. It was the grind that makes storms hold. Then the pretty threats sharpened. A shattered taillight, a drone hovering outside a window, a letter addressed in cut-out magazine letters because someone had watched too much television. Eleanor logged each, then drove to the church for coffee and strategy. Fear receded under fluorescent hum and gospel posters. At the next forum, Harrow tried a charm offensive, stories about his daddy's badge, promises of listening sessions. An elder stood and asked for badge numbers plainly. Harrow stumbled. Cameras loved it. A teenager read the ordinance that protected filming police. Applause rose like summer heat, relentless and communal. Kincaid moved his timeline up again, press releasing glossy renderings of Oak Lane Square, green roofs, and smiling silhouettes with no resemblance to current residents. Eleanor quietly subpoenaed, permitting emails through a friendly council member. The thread showed drafts routed through Kincaid's team before public comment even opened. Chin called, "We're close, Patterson. We need Danner in a safe box, and the engineer deposed yesterday." Eleanor agreed. She coordinated a quiet transfer for Danner to a federal holdout, then sat with the engineer to record testimony. He cried twice, ashamed of small compromises that turned into big harms. The Gazette finally hedged, publishing a piece questioning the bonus program's metrics, a crack, small but real. Stanton pushed back, with a letter to the editor dripping with paternal sorrow. Meanwhile, online comments filled with dates, forms, and addresses, facts repeating like a drum. The narrative had resisted spin. The morning Danner moved, the surveillance sedan disappeared. Too quiet, consignal teeth. Eleanor altered routes, used different doors, and kept her phone on voice record. That afternoon, she noticed a new tail, an SUV with dealership stickers. She waved at its tinted windshield. It turned left. She kept driving. That evening, Porsche's window company arrived, church folks with measuring tape and a group text thread. Repairs turned into a potluck and testimony session. A deacon offered to store boxes of documents in the baptistry alcove. "Nobody checks there," he winked. "Institutions matter, not just courts, when communities are hunted." The threatening calls returned, now with specifics about routes and routines. Eleanor answered one on speaker with Reynolds present. "You're wasting breath," she said. "We're writing." After she filed the recording, "Devotion looks like paperwork. Courage looks like showing up again tomorrow with a better index tab." At the courthouse, Eleanor pulled a public file and found a memo accidentally left inside. Someone's talking points on deflecting outside agitation and praising partnership with vetted developers. The header traced back to Stanton's chambers. She photographed, logged, and returned it, smiling at the notion of fate being helpful. Stanton cornered her near the elevator again, voice velvet over wire. "Boundaries, Judge Marlowe," he murmured. "Territories matter." She met his gaze. "The Constitution has only one." A deputy snorted involuntarily. Stanton's jaw pinched. The elevator dinged. Doors opened. "Sometimes victory is a sentence spoken clean." Eleanor filed her first two actions, one federal, one state, under seal with rapid-fire exhibits and preservation demands. Copies went to Chin and Patterson. She texted Portia, a single word, "Filed." Portia replied with a prayer hands emoji and a photo of kids at the center reading after school, unbothered and radiant. That night, the sedan reappeared with new plates. Eleanor stepped out with a flashlight and camera. "Smile," she said, cheerful and dangerous. The car rolled away. A neighbor across the street clapped softly. Small applause in the dark can feel like armor. She slept, finally, with briefs, stacked like centuries. Morning delivered rain and resolve. In chambers, she signed routine orders with a steadiness no headline could shake. When Portia called, her voice was bright. Inspection board reversed 2 items. We bought time. Danner texted a thumbs up from his safe room. Momentum is quiet first, then obvious. Eleanor felt both. That evening, they returned to Westbrook's fancy restaurant. Reynolds briefed her on deposition dates. Portia pointed out a council member avoiding eye contact. The room hummed with chatter, forks, and fear. The door opened. Silence bent. Vaughn Kincaid walked in like a donor gala. Smile lacquered. Confidence engineered. He beelined to their table, hand outstretched, before permission. "Judge Marlowe, what a fortunate coincidence." He didn't believe in coincidences. "Vaughn Kincaid," he said, "I've heard you're invested in our development conversation." He kept standing, forcing theater. Portia stared back, unimpressed. Reynolds folded his napkin deliberately. Kincaid gripped Eleanor's hand briefly. She didn't rise. "I'm always open to hearing visions for Westbrook," she said, tone cool. He leaned in, savoring the room's attention. Oak Lane has potential under thoughtful leadership, he said smoothly. He wasn't used to being told no. Tonight he would learn how it sounded. Without invitation, Vaughn Kincaid slid a chair from the next table and sat. My foundation supports worthy causes, he said smoothly. Scholarships, retirement funds, endowments for promising law students. Perhaps something aligned with your passions, Judge Philanthropy, as packaging, inducement inside. He smiled like money talking. The bribe, dressed as benevolence, came with an easy reference to misunderstandings with police that grown-ups could resolve privately. Eleanor's reply stayed measured, neither welcoming nor striking. Mr. Kincaid, your interest in community is noted. Now, if you'll excuse us, we're finishing dinner. He departed wearing certainty that cash could tame storms. She'd rattled the hive. The beekeeper himself had come. Back at Portia's, Eleanor staged a feint for any ears in the walls. This is getting complicated, she sighed, sounding tired. Jurisdiction's messy. My direct role could be problematic. Maybe we should step back, consider options. The bait glittered perfectly. While Westbrook's circle exhaled, Eleanor deepened the real work through sealed federal channels. Trusted investigators documented harassment. Victims prepared sworn statements. Malik and Talia rehearsed testimony. A paper trail revealed Kincaid's projects riding federal community improvement grants, fresh jurisdictional leverage. Meanwhile, Officer Danner's value surged from brave to indispensable. He supplied emails musing about population adjustment in Oak Lane, dashcam from Eleanor's stop that IT had lost, and ledgers showing payments from Kincaid's firm to a consultancy owned by Chief Harrow's brother-in-law. Spikes in enforcement mapped precisely to those transfers. Believing Eleanor retreating, they accelerated their calendar. Portia received notice. The community center failed safety inspection and would close in 48 hours. The citation list demanded tens of thousands, impossible for a nonprofit. Worse, a demolition application already sat preliminarily approved in Judge Stanton's court, implying the verdict had existed long before anyone picked up a clipboard. The move confirmed a rapid push. Clear the last obstacle before bulldozers. Eleanor read falsified reports and felt the timeline collapse. Investigative patience was now a luxury residents couldn't afford. The danger wasn't abstract. It stalked kitchens and classrooms. She adjusted plan and tempo to meet an emergency. Do you believe power should answer for abuses even when titles gleam? Type 1, if accountability belongs to everyone, especially the mighty. Like and subscribe for stories that expose injustice and celebrate courage. As Judge Marlowe sets the snare, what happens next? Careful planning meets an entrenched machine. The most dangerous chess moves look like retreat. Publicly, Eleanor recused herself from matters touching Westbrook, citing her unfortunate encounter with police. The formal statement framed concern about perceived bias. To Stanton, Harrow, and Kincaid, it read as capitulation. Champagne logic. Pressure works. The federal judge folded. Celebration popped fast. Stanton threw an impromptu gathering at his lavish home. Harrow arrived grinning, expensive scotch in hand. Told you she'd fold once we leaned, he crowed, pouring for Kincaid, who'd just stepped from a chauffeured sedan. To federal judges who know their place, Kincaid toasted glass high. Stanton swirled amber and smirked. Smarter than I credited, recognized a losing fight. None realized the recusal was Eleanor's first gambit designed to lower their guard. With trusted U.S. Marshals, she'd already seated recorders in Stanton's study, Harrow's office, and Kincaid's country club sanctum, their favorite rooms for candor. Phase 2, encourage them to talk freely. Through secure channels, a planted legal industry piece suggested DOJ's small-town housing discrimination probe had been shelved for resource reasons, attention shifting to major metros. Coupled with Eleanor's recusal, the article built a cushion of overconfidence thick enough to nap on. It worked too well. Within days, devices captured a three-man summit where they bragged about Oak Lane and a 15-year partnership. Stanton, loose from success in Scotch, reminisced. Remember Dr. Wilson, the first black physician here? Thought a diploma made him untouchable. How many health violations before he sold? Harrow chuckled. 17. When he fought, we hit him for contempt until he drowned in fees. Kincaid steered present tense. With the Fed judge out, accelerate acquisitions. I want demolition in 30 days. Investors are impatient. They diagrammed the playbook. Target holdouts, manufacture charges, fine, drag to court, exhaust pockets. Stanton detailed his part. Swift dismissals, friendly liens, expedited transfers. Then came darker boasts. Prior would-be exposers who'd stopped asking questions. That organizer, Johnson, Stanton mused. Harrow's reply slithered. Shame about that fatal crash. The implication wasn't subtle. The tape alone could anchor indictments. Eleanor kept building. Danner confirmed the scheme's span more than 15 years, and its reach beyond Oak Lane to any black-owned parcel Kincaid prized. Dozens displaced, landmark businesses erased, history unthreaded. He connected 3 suspicious deaths in a decade, officially accidents or medical events, circumstances whispering orchestration. Eleanor moved people forward. Talia's firing became a federal employment case, preserving records. Malik's arrest grew into malicious prosecution claims. She identified 7 additional victims willing to testify, each story a tessera that together formed the mosaic of systemic discrimination. Under seal, she initiated a federal probe with armored discretion. Documents lived in secure federal facilities, not local drawers Stanton could open. While evidence stacked, Kincaid pressed his build. Demolition rigs nosed near Portia's center, ready the instant the 48-hour window closed. Eviction notices fell on Oak Lane porches, timelines illegal yet stamped with Stanton's signature. Eleanor countered with misdirection and law. Through an associate judge, because her recusal stood, she obtained an emergency federal injunction freezing evictions and demolitions, citing a live civil rights investigation. Stanton, Harrow, and Kincaid reeled. What investigation? Stanton snapped. Mitchell recused. DOJ shelved the inquiry. Harrow paced. Could be a bluff, another judge fronting while she pulls strings. Kincaid stayed transactional. Contain it fast. I have 50 million locked in. Delays burn, then their focus turned predator sharp toward Eleanor. We may need a permanent solution, Stanton said, voice sanded of empathy. Hours later, Danner pinged the secure line. They're planning something. Rourke and Baird just left Harrow's office with surveillance gear and an unmarked car. That warning accelerated Eleanor's final phase, a controlled confrontation designed to make them state the conspiracy out loud while eliminating their imagined exit ramps. She briefed U.S. Marshals, built a tight comms net, and moved Portia to a safe house out of town. The closing act would be surgical. Risk remained non-zero. She accepted it. The goal: force explicit connections, police to judge to developer, on camera and mic, then close the box hard. The abandoned Wilson property, once the Black Doctor's proud home, became the stage. Woods wrapped 3 sides, perfect for concealed teams. At dusk, Eleanor parked plainly in the circular drive, ensuring surveillance would catch her. A trusted reporter received a breadcrumb about meeting an informant at that address. The porch groaned as she stepped into the long silent parlor. 4 hidden cameras installed earlier covered angles agents loved. Feeds streamed to secure servers. She checked her watch, left her holster empty. Any hint of aggression could muddy the case. Headlights swept the faded wallpaper. An unmarked sedan arrived. Through dusty glass, she watched Rourke and Baird exit, nerves telegraphing through their movements. They advanced with exaggerated caution, palms near weapons. No knock. The door swung. Flashlights laced the dim until they found her, still as a plumb line. Judge Marlowe, Rourke said, mock formal. Interesting venue. Baird held the doorway like a stopper. Rourke prowled. Routine patrol. This place has break-ins. Imagine our surprise. Federal judge trespassing Eleanor redirected. Curious how your patrols fixate on Oak Lane vacancies, especially where owners refuse Kincaid's offers. The name detonated their composure. A glance flickered between them. Don't know what you mean, Rourke said, posture sharpening. But since you raised it, there's concern about a federal judge overstepping, harassing officials, making claims without evidence. He closed to invade her space. Judge Stanton worries about your mental stamina. Seeing discrimination where there's only good policing. Cameras heard everything. Eleanor stayed anchored. I have evidence of coordinated discrimination against black homeowners in Oak Lane. Police, Stanton's court, and Kincaid's firm. Baird finally snapped. Evidence? From criminals and complainers. Nobody will believe them over decorated officers and a county judge. Eleanor didn't blink. She began to list. Financials tying Kincaid's money to Harrow's family consultancy, timed with enforcement spikes. Internal emails targeting holdout properties. Sworn statements describing fabricated charges. Dashcam from my stop that vanished from official servers. Realization crept into their faces. She'd tunneled deeper than they imagined, and the walls were thin. Rourke's voice cooled into threat. You've been busy. Too busy. Folks might read that as interference. Dangerous hobby in a town you don't understand. Eleanor replied evenly. I understand perfectly pretext stops, bonus metrics for Oak Lane citations, Stanton's dismissals, fast-tracked evictions, and 3 accidental deaths. The word deaths jolted them. Baird stepped forward. Rourke's hand settled on his weapon. Careful with accusations, he murmured. People who push too hard have accidents here, like that organizer, Johnson. Tragic brake failure. The admission landed everywhere, on lenses, in mics, inside a prosecutor's future closing. Eleanor pressed. And Dr. Wilson, the original owner here? Rourke laughed, humorless. Heart attack, shame, fighting code violations can be stressful. He closed the last inches. Federal judges have accidents too. Lonely roads, single-car crashes. Happens Eleanor met his stare. Is that Stanton and Kincaid's decision? Baird shifted, uneasy. Rourke overcommitted. Stanton says you're a liability. Kincaid's build can't wait. Harrow agrees Westbrook's better off without you. Then he drew, leveling the gun at her. Here's the story. We found you trespassing. You got agitated. Things escalated. Tragic. Federal overreach has consequences. Eleanor's pulse stayed slow. And you think that survives a federal scrutiny? The muzzle pressed her temple, the echo of their first encounter. What scrutiny? Rourke sneered. Your recusal stands. Stanton questions your stability. Your evidence is obsession from a troubled mind. He smirked. Not so high and mighty now. She'd been waiting for that sentence, the threat and the conspiracy, spoken clean. 3 words cut the scene in half. Federal marshals now. Doors and windows thundered. Marshals poured in, discipline, loud, decisive. Rourke was disarmed, stunned. Baird bolted and was tackled outside. Eleanor didn't flinch. Years on the bench had trained her nerves into steel. Across Westbrook, synchronized warrants snapped open. Police station, courthouse, Kincaid headquarters. Timed precisely, the moves denied anyone a chance to light a shredder the moment Rourke and Baird hit cuffs. Panic scattered where Swagger had lived. At the station, Harrow barricaded himself, trying to torch files. The standoff fizzled when younger officers, Danner among them, refused orders to resist. In chambers, Stanton was caught attempting to flee, suitcase packed, offshore paperwork tucked inside like a confession. Consciousness of guilt sometimes looks like monograms. The most theatrical scene unfolded at Kincaid Development. Eleanor accompanied agents as security-fed shredders at midnight. Warrant presented, Kincaid demanded words with her, alone but not unobserved. The office was all glass and ego. This is unnecessary, he said, charm-curdled. We're professionals. We understand how things work. Name your price. Her silence invited escalation. 1,000,000, 5, a foundation in your name, unlimited funding. He leaned in. This doesn't need to become public. Eleanor's answer carried courtroom authority. You're under investigation for conspiracy, public corruption, fraud, and possibly accessory to murder. There isn't a price. His mask cracked. 10,000,000 tonight, cash offshore your structure, he hissed. Everyone has a price. What's yours? Eleanor stood. Justice isn't for sale. As she turned, he grabbed her arm. Do you know who I know? Agent stepped in, unpeeled his hand, and cuffed him. Cameras waited outside. News crews Portia had tipped caught the image. Vaughn Kincaid, handcuffed, led from glass doors into night and flashbulbs. The picture became Westbrook's symbol. Later, Eleanor visited Malik's cell with marshals and release papers. His eyes flooded. Is this real? It's real, she said. Your courage mattered. She found Talia next, bringing word of federal charges against her former employer for police-directed termination. Tears came fast. I didn't think anyone would believe us. Eleanor squeezed her hand. Most don't have power to fight back. That's why those who do must use it. So truth outlives intimidation. Sunrise brought the first reports, 15 indicted initially, including the 3 architects and several enablers. Cameras showed evidence leaving Stanton's chambers, Harrow's office, and Kincaid's headquarters. Most powerful were Oak Lane residents gathering at the saved community center, hugging, weeping, naming this feeling aloud. Relief. What began as a biased traffic stop now read as one of the state's major civil rights operations, uncovering not stray prejudice, but a designed apparatus to strip rights and property by race. Exhausted, Eleanor allowed a breath. Accountability was only the first step. Rebuilding trust would be slower, harder necessary. 6 months redrew Westbrook's map. Autumn gilded Oak Lane as Judge Eleanor Marlowe drove slowly, noting changes both subtle and bold since spring. 6 months remade Westbrook in ways residents could feel in their bones. Street corners, once heavy with suspicion, hosted block parties and planning sessions. The same sidewalks where tickets piled up now saw clipboards tallying grant proposals. What began as survival matured into deliberate, neighbor-led renewal. The sign outside headquarters read, Westbrook Police Department, under new leadership, community-oriented policing. Inside, procedures weren't theater anymore. Chief Harrow served 20 years in federal custody for corruption, evidence tampering, civil rights violations, and conspiracy. The badge kept meaning. The man who warped it did not. Accountability tightened the seams. Federal oversight guided daily practice. A respected retired state commander ran the interim department, pairing policy with presence. Officer Danner, once junior, now trusted, helped build training on constitutional standards and implicit bias recognition. Patrol logs changed too. Footbeats, neighborhood meetings, transparent stop data. Community members measured outcomes alongside captains, not as staged optics. The courthouse transformed as well. Judge Stanton awaited trial on multiple federal counts, denied bail after a failed flight, and offshore revelations. Visiting judges rotated through to keep dockets moving until a special election could seat new leadership. Pleadings finally lived or died on law, not whispers or favors. Where glossy renderings promised Oak Lane Square, weeds now waved around chain link. Kincaid's empire collapsed under fraud probes, bankruptcy filings, and dissolving contracts. His project was abandoned. The land shifted to a community-led trust Portia championed. Plans focused on preserving families, not displacing them, actual neighbors, not brochure silhouettes. The community center throbbed with useful chaos, childcare in one room, tenant rights workshops in another, a grant clinic humming by the copier. Portia moved like a conductor, baton invisible but undeniable. People didn't whisper here anymore. They planned out loud and put dates on whiteboards the city now respected. We got it, Portia said, waving a letter. The Historical Society approved landmark status for the Wilson House and 5 original Oak Lane homes, legal armor against speculative pressure. The designations meant capital for restoration, not demolition. Elders cried, grandchildren asked about paint colors. Memory finally earned an easement. Familiar faces filled every corner. Talia, once terrified in a cell, now served as program coordinator, chairing a committee on neighborhood entrepreneurship and fair lending access. She spoke with the authority of someone who'd survived the machine and learned its gears. Employers took her calls promptly. City staff did too. Malik, steadier now, prepped for his first semester of law school under Eleanor's mentorship. Between shifts, he guided elders through property grant forms, reading line by line, translating jargon into yeses. His mother saved acceptance letters like heirlooms. "I'm going to argue in your courtroom someday," he promised, grinning. "3 more towns," Portia said during a walkthrough. The task force Eleanor helped build had traced Westbrook's pattern elsewhere: developers, officials, and police leveraging public power for private acquisition. Federal teams opened cases, whistleblowers called quietly at night. A template, once invisible, now read like sheet music. Professionally, reactions mixed. Some colleagues called Eleanor's approach unorthodox, fearing a judge's proximity to the facts. Others, especially with civil rights roots, called it necessary courage. Under oath, the debate sharpened before her long-pending nomination, promotion to the Circuit Court of Appeals, now wrapped in brighter scrutiny and longer microphones. In the Senate hearings last round, Senator Richardson leaned into skepticism. "Judge Marlowe, critics say you ran a sting rather than exhibiting judicial restraint. Where's the line between adjudication and activism?" The room stilled. Eleanor understood the stakes. Jurisprudence, yes, but also whether survival sometimes required design. "Senator, I swore to uphold the Constitution," she said. "When I personally witnessed orchestrated violations by those sworn to enforce the law, I faced 2 paths: act within lawful authority or look away because courage might be controversial. I chose the oath, not the comfort pens paused above yellow pads. Courts don't exist only to parse abstractions," she continued. "We ensure justice touches actual lives without regard to wealth, race, or status." In Westbrook, standard channels meant destroyed evidence and silenced witnesses, as history showed repeatedly. Intervention wasn't vanity, it was the only route that preserved truth. Our oath demands active defense of constitutional guarantees, especially when doing so is hard or personally costly. If that's labeled activism, then perhaps the definition of judicial duty has drifted from the Constitution, it claims. Her tone never rose, but conviction filled the distance between dais and gallery. Silence held, then released, in whispered calculus. Cameras cut, hallways filled with murmurs. 3 weeks later, a narrow majority confirmed her to the circuit bench. The margin was tight. The message was not. Courage had a cost and a constituency. She wrote thank yous, then returned to unfinished work. A month before reporting to the new court, Eleanor made one more official visit. Patrols didn't tail her. Officers nodded politely. She parked by the center and walked through a gallery of photographs. Oak Lane's past in black and white, beside renderings of a future shaped by those who actually lived there. The exhibition in the main hall traced migration north, redlining maps, porch portraits, church choirs, protest signs, and finally affidavits stamped and filed. A panel titled "Alleys in the Fight" featured Portia's grin next to Eleanor's judicial portrait and a preacher's weathered hands. Gratitude felt heavier than her robe. "Would you talk to our cohort?" Malik asked, ushering a dozen students from the youth leadership program he'd founded. Eleanor sat in a circle and fielded questions about standing, discovery, qualified immunity, and courage. "Law is a tool," she said, "sharp enough to harm or to carve doors." A young woman asked what had haunted Eleanor for months. "If you hadn't been a federal judge, would anyone have believed you?" Eleanor answered plainly. "Probably not. That's exactly why people with authority must spend it protecting those without. The measure of justice is how it shields the vulnerable." Before leaving, she met privately with Talia, now chairing the Civilian Oversight Committee, with actual selecting power for the next police chief. Interviews next week, Talia said, proud and steady. We're setting criteria with the neighborhood first. Policy at last faced the people it governed. On the edge of town, a new motto hung beneath the population count, where justice matters for everyone. It wasn't absolution, it was a commitment. Eleanor slowed, memorizing the font and the small chips already forming on the paint, reminders that promises require upkeep, like porches and democracies. She drove, considering how a traffic stop stripped the disguise from a machine designed to convert neighbor into nuisance, home into asset, protest into fine. The transformation that followed demanded persistence from Portia, bravery from Talia and Malik, conscience from Danner, and stubborn fidelity to law from her bench. Has this story reframed discrimination for you as systems, not snapshots? If equal treatment under law resonates, tap like and subscribe so more people meet Oak Lane's courage. Share this with anyone who needs proof that accountability can climb ladders and knock on executive suites as easily as squad cars. What other stories should we tell? Quiet revolutions in small towns, whistleblowers inside sealed rooms, neighbors who built alternatives when institutions failed. Drop suggestions below. We listen, then investigate, then return with receipts. Justice isn't only verdicts, it's the record we build together, carefully. Remember, change begins when one person refuses the comfortable lie. Racism rarely arrives solo. It rides systems designed to guard wealth and convenience. Eleanor's stop revealed a network, badges, benches, and boardrooms aligned. The cure required disassembly, policy, culture, incentives, piece by stubborn piece on camera. Real accountability works at multiple levels: local boards, state ethics, federal oversight, so no one click controls every exit. Stanton, Harrow, and Kincaid built a sealed loop. Oversight broke it. If you're mapping your town's system, trace money, calendars, and codes. Bureaucracy properly read becomes a witness. Systems shift when people inside refuse complicity. Danner risked his badge. Engineers told inconvenient truths. Clerks slid files across counters faster than protocol allowed. Talia and Malik testified despite retaliation. Courage isn't an abstraction. It's minutes, memos, and meetings, accumulated until they outweigh fear and inertia. Privilege carries obligation. Eleanor could have walked away, soothed by title. Instead, she treated authority as a public trust, not armor. That choice bent outcomes for people without microphones. If you hold leverage in offices, schools, shops, consider where it might unlock doors rather than fortify gates others can't pass. Have you witnessed discrimination and felt powerless, or held a platform and hesitated? Justice often depends on ordinary people choosing risk over resignation. If this moved you, boost it. The algorithm is a gate, too, and you can push it open for stories that strengthen spines instead of shrugging shoulders. Subscribe for more narratives where neighbors outthink machines and stubborn facts outlast spin. What would you have done in Judge Marlowe's position or Officer Danner's when right and safe diverged? Answer below. Your words might become someone else's map the next time the room gets quiet and heavy. Thank you for walking Westbrook's road with us. By sharing, you lend courage to the next witness, clerk, officer, or student who will not look away. Justice is cumulative work: petitions and affidavits, casseroles and carpools, deadlines and candles. Together, they light hallways previously kept dark. Until next time, hold fast to the premise that justice belongs to everyone, regardless of race, wealth, or status. Demand receipts, ask boring questions, and write things down. That's how communities outlast eras and how hope becomes habit rather than headline. We'll keep telling the stories that prove it. Remember, systemic change often begins with one person refusing the easy path, documenting, organizing, insisting on law. Then another joins, then a dozen, then a city. Westbrook isn't finished, but it's different because people chose courage where fear was expected. See you soon, and keep your notes handy. The shot that ricocheted across the state was simple. Vaughn Kincaid in handcuffs, flanked by agents exiting glass doors into night and cameras. That photograph became shorthand for Westbrook's reckoning. It traveled faster than rumors, landing on morning front pages and late night feeds almost simultaneously. Later, Eleanor walked into county lockup beside marshals and signed Malik's release. Disbelief spilled into tears as the cell clicked open. "It's real," she assured, handing paperwork to a stunned deputy. "Your statement mattered." The young man stepped forward, shoulders straighter than when they dragged him in. She found Talia next, bringing news of federal charges against the employer who fired her after a police visit. Hearing that records must be preserved, Talia wept, relief cutting through months of fear. "I never thought anyone would believe us." "They will now," Eleanor said, squeezing her hand. By sunrise, first bulletins aired, a coordinated federal action exposing years of discriminatory policing and public corruption. 15 initial defendants, more expected. Footage showed evidence boxes leaving Stanton's chambers, Harrow's office, and Kincaid's headquarters. Commentators used words like systemic, pattern, enterprise, finally describing what residents had described for years. Outside the saved community center, Oak Lane gathered, hugs, prayer circles, sudden laughter cracking through fatigue. People pointed at the injunction order taped to the door like a shield. For once, cameras captured faces relieved, not humiliated. History bent a degree toward fairness directly in front of them. What began with a tainted traffic stop had become one of Michigan's most consequential civil rights operations, not a rogue episode, but an engineered apparatus. Exhausted on Portia's couch, Eleanor allowed a single breath. Accountability wasn't the end. Rebuilding trust would demand longer work, patient hands, and transparent systems. Half a year later, Westbrook looked different even in silence. Storefronts mended, patrol routes posted online. Meetings that used to be whispers were printed agendas with public comment. Eleanor drove slowly beneath flaming maple leaves, cataloging changes and absences. Understanding transformation is both renovation and grief in equal measure. The most visible proof stood at the station entrance. Westbrook Police. Under new leadership, community-oriented policing. Inside a top-to-bottom overhaul. Former Chief Harrow now occupied a federal cell, serving 2 decades for corruption, evidence tampering, civil rights violations, and conspiracy. His name left the wall. Policies bearing it were shredded. Federal monitors oversaw reforms. An admired retired commander ran the interim. Officer Danner, whose testimony helped crack everything, joined training teams, teaching implicit bias recognition and constitutional policing standards. The courthouse changed too. Stanton awaited trial without bail after a flight attempt, captured with cashmere coats, a suitcase, and offshore papers. The crater where Kincaid's luxury complex was planned became opportunity. His empire collapsed into bankruptcy as investigators traced fraud beyond Westbrook. Oak Lane Square died on the drawing board. In its place, a community-led redevelopment took root. Portia's coalition steering design tables, where residents, not investors, finally held the pens. The community center thrummed, planning charrettes, childcare, legal clinics, food co-ops in brainstorming mode. Eleanor parked and walked inside to find Portia orchestrating volunteers like a conductor. "Historic Society approved," Portia grinned. "The Wilson House and 5 original Oak Lane properties will be landmarked. Protection with teeth, not plaques." Gathering dust. Familiar faces filled the room. Talia, now the center's program coordinator, led a working group on small business microgrants. Malik, prepping for his first semester of law school under Eleanor's mentorship, helped elders navigate restoration paperwork. Watching them move with authority, Eleanor felt something steady anchor. Courage was compounding into leadership. "Your task force's ripple keeps widening," Portia said as they toured. 3 more towns with almost identical patterns had surfaced. The special federal team, built from Westbrook's blueprint, now traced similar alliances between developers, officials, and police elsewhere. The work was heavy, real, and finally pointed somewhere other than resignation. Not every robe applauded. Some colleagues muttered that Eleanor had strayed past judicial fences, wading too directly into the fray. Others, especially veterans of civil rights litigation, praised her resolve to confront violations shielded by office and custom. Those arguments soon converged under brighter lights than Chambers' whispers. Her long-pending nomination to the Court of Appeals finally reached hearing. The room quieted as Senator Richardson, a skeptic of her methods, asked the last question. Judge Marlowe, critics call what you did a sting. Isn't that activism inconsistent with the restraint we expect from the federal bench? Eleanor considered, knowing one answer could tilt votes. Senator, my oath is to the Constitution and equal justice. When I personally witnessed a coordinated deprivation of rights by officials sworn to uphold the law, I faced two choices: act within lawful authority or look away because courage might be controversial. She looked down the dais. Courts don't exist to admire statutes and glass cases. We exist to ensure the law protects people equally. In Westbrook, evidence would have vanished and witnesses been threatened had I simply filed paperwork and waited. Prior attempts proved that attrition was the plan. The oath demands more than comfort, she continued, voice steady. It requires principled action when rights are at risk, even when doing so is personally costly. If that is labeled activism, perhaps our definition of judicial courage needs revision. Behind her, Oak Lane neighbors watched, shoulder to shoulder, present tense. The room held its breath, then adjourned without fireworks. 3 weeks later, the vote barely cleared the bar. Confirmation to the circuit by a narrow majority. The letter felt both heavy and light in Eleanor's hands, a door opening not to comfort, but to a larger set of responsibilities. Before stepping into the new role, she made one more official visit to Westbrook. Officers from the Reform Department nodded as she passed. At the community center, displays charted Oak Lane's history alongside sketches of what's coming. Photos of grand openings flanked pictures of front porches saved from demolition. A new exhibit filled the main hall, Westbrook remembered, telling the neighborhood's story through sermons, receipts, videotapes, and court orders. One wall honored allies, Portia, Danner, Reynolds, and reluctantly, Eleanor herself. Seeing her photo there, contextualized rather than celebrated, she felt unexpectedly emotional. Survival deserves documentation as much as victory. Marcus appeared with students from the youth leadership program he'd launched. Judge Marlowe, could you talk to our group? Law school suddenly seems possible. She stayed an hour, answering frank questions about power, fear, and procedure. The refrain she offered, law is a tool. Integrity and courage decide its purpose. A young woman asked the question that had haunted Eleanor privately. If you weren't a federal judge, would anyone have believed you when the police mistreated you? Eleanor didn't dodge. Probably not. Which is why those with authority must use it to shield those without. That's the measure. Before leaving, she met with Talia, now chairing a civilian oversight committee with real power over the department, not ceremonial advice. We interview finalists for chief next week, Talia said. Proud and focused, the journey from detainee to decision maker might be the most meaningful transformation Westbrook witnessed. On the way out, Eleanor passed the updated town sign. Beneath the population count, a modest new line read, "Where justice matters for everyone." It was small, almost plain, which suited her. Promises should be measurable. Let residents decide whether the slogan earns bolder letters over the coming years. Driving east, she considered the opening domino, a routine stop steeped in bias. Beneath it lay an engineered system. Exposing it had created space for different choices, transparent policy, community design, accountable courts. None of it was magic. It was meetings, filings, affidavits, and stubborn citizens refusing to quit. Do stories like this change how you think about discrimination's mechanics? If you believe law should protect every neighbor, regardless of status, tap like and subscribe. Share with someone who doubts systems can change. Westbrook isn't a miracle. It's proof that coordinated courage can outwork a coordinated scheme. What other accounts of grit against discrimination do you want covered? Drop ideas below, or your own experience. Algorithms don't amplify silence. They lift what communities engage. The more we surface patterns, the harder they are to deny. Help us document, learn, and act together toward fairer hometowns. Until next time, remember, systemic change often begins when one person refuses to accept injustice, even at personal risk. That refusal, multiplied, breaks closed loops. In Westbrook, a judge's resolve mattered, but so did a sister's records, an officer's conscience, and a neighborhood's refusal to disappear quietly. Because racism rarely arrives alone, it travels with power, money, robes, and uniforms. Westbrook showed how those alliances can be unmade through evidence, daylight, and relentless civic work. Keep watching, keep reporting, keep organizing. The arc does not bend by itself. Hands pull inch by inch, day after day. Add your voice below if this moved you, not for algorithms alone, but because testimony strengthens memory. Maybe someone standing where you once stood will find these comments and feel less alone. That's how communities practice defense. By sharing maps, warnings, and small victories others can reuse tomorrow. If you're in a system and feel complicit, remember Officer Danner. If you're targeted, remember Talia and Malik. If you hold power, remember Eleanor's answer under oath. Each role mattered. None required perfection. Only steady, brave decisions repeated until the architecture of harm finally cracked open. We'll keep telling these stories about small towns, big cities, and the places between, because sunlight changes incentives. Subscribe to join a community documenting patterns and victories. Send tips securely. We protect sources because truth deserves armor. Westbrook's lesson is portable. Carry it back to your block and build with it. Back in her car, Eleanor let the engine idle. The day's docket waited, and a new circuit seat demanded discipline. She touched the steering wheel where the cuffs had once bitten her wrists. Scars fade. Memories shouldn't. She signaled, merged, and drove toward work that wouldn't fit headlines. Power tends to seal exits. Accountability blows doors open. Crawford, Stanton, Harrow, Kincaid. Names now filed under precedent rather than inevitability. If Westbrook could be unrigged, so can other places wearing different zip codes. The blueprint isn't secret. Document, organize, litigate, legislate, repeat. Exhaustion is real, so is momentum. Individual courage mattered at every hinge. Danner risked career and safety. Talia rebuilt after retaliation. Malik converted fear into study plans. Portia turned years of notes into a living archive. Each choice made the next possible. An escalator running the right direction for once, lifting everyone who stepped on. Institutions shifted too because people inside them moved. Young officers refused to shield a chief destroying evidence. Visiting judges stabilized calendars. A retired commander rewired training norms. Federal monitors insisted data live in daylight. Culture is just repeated choices, repeat better ones long enough, and structure starts resembling promise. Privilege carries duty. Eleanor could have used status to escape and moved on. Instead, she spent social capital to pry open doors for others. Leadership isn't aura, it's what you're willing to risk to widen the circle. The robe helped, yes, but the work required spine beneath it. Have you seen discrimination and felt small against it? Or held a microphone and hesitated? Westbrook's story argues for bolder answers. Courage rarely looks cinematic. Usually it's paperwork, emails, affidavits, phone trees, and 1,000 quiet refusals. Start there. We'll meet you with templates, allies, and receipts. Thank you for traveling this road with us, from a shoulder stop to a statewide reckoning. If this narrative sharpened your sense of what's possible, share it. The more people who learn the pattern, the fewer places it hides. Subscribe, bring someone next time. We'll keep walking together. And remember, enduring change begins when ordinary people, standing where they are, refuse to accept unjust rules. That refusal, multiplied, breaks capture. Westbrook proves systems can be redesigned in public. Keep showing up with documents, testimonies, and neighbors. Justice isn't abstract. It's built block by block until everyone belongs. Lesson: Spend your authority, don't hoard it. If you've lived long enough to see rotary phones turn into smartphones, you know titles and uniforms don't always equal decency. Judge Eleanor Marlowe learned that on a two-lane road at 40 miles an hour, wrists burning where the cuffs bit. Her lesson for us, especially those 65 and up, is simple and sturdy. Authority is a tool to be spent on others. Eleanor could have flashed her badge and driven home. Instead, she held her tongue, gathered facts, and later used her position to shield neighbors with less power. Talia fired after a visit. Malik jailed on a trumped-up charge. Officer Danner risking his badge to tell the truth. Portia's dog-eared binder, names, dates, photos, receipts, mattered as much as any courtroom speech. In Westbrook, the scheme ran from squad car to bench to boardroom, but it cracked when seasoned adults chose paperwork over panic, records over rumors, and community over comfort. That's our take-home. Experience, patience, and meticulous notes can turn a crooked story straight. Whether you sit on a church board or a HOA committee, your signature, your voice, and your memory are instruments. Use them. Friends, after walking with Judge Marlowe through Oak Lane's fight, what's one piece of authority you can spend this week? Making a phone call to a council member, showing up at a public meeting, helping a neighbor document a bad stop, or sharing a paper trail you've kept in a desk drawer to move your town an inch closer to fairness. And what's the biggest worry that holds you back from doing it today? Tell us your city in the comments, tap like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you'll get our next practical guide for seniors turning experience into action.